Welcome to Melis Fairy. Today we're going to be reacting to your hot takes that you commented on one of my community posts about Tears of the Kingdom. I do want to warn you, there will be spoilers. They're not major spoilers, but they're big enough. So if you haven't finished the game, I would advise you to not watch or watch at your own risk. You've been warned, let's get into it. I feel like shrines were better done in Breath of the Wild, disregarding the blessings and tests of strength shrines. Most of them were creative and cool ways to use Link's abilities, and they posed a pretty decent challenge as puzzles. In Tears of the Kingdom, however, the number of blessing shrines is ridiculous. And even though tests of strength are no more and event-type challenges are good, we now have many tutorial shrines with no substance at all. I'm kind of skimming through it because it's a bit common, but I want to get the general idea. It just hurts me that with all the amazing new abilities at our disposal, most shrines are done in like 3 minutes. I believe Breath of the Wild was more consistent on the quality of the shrine puzzles. So I agree and disagree with this one. I haven't done all of the Tears of the Kingdom shrines yet, but it's pretty clear that 90% of them you can just do with a rocket shield. Yeah, I think that's a fair statement. And there are more ways to cheese shrines now than there were in Breath of the Wild. Although wind bombs were kind of the equivalent in Breath of the Wild, you can pretty much cheese the majority of the shrines in Breath of the Wild with wind bombs. So in the sense that you can get through the shrines now in like 3 minutes, you could do that in Breath of the Wild too. But I do agree that the puzzles of the shrines in Breath of the Wild, as far as I've seen, were a little better designed, and there are a lot of blessings for sure in Tears of the Kingdom. Alright, next one. The building zone for Link's house is way too small. 20 pieces max is not enough. Okay, so I don't even think it's 20, I think it's 15. Unless I'm missing some sort of upgrade, but I'm pretty sure it's 15. And I do agree that they should allow more rooms to be used. I don't think the actual area is too small. I think the area is fine. But I do wish we could use more rooms for sure, because I find it very limiting. There should be gloomed guardian stalkers in the depths as dangerous encounters, and or the divine beast ruins in the same fashion as the great dark skeletons. Agree 100%. I think one of the biggest gripes people have with Tears of the Kingdom is how they've kind of shunned away the Sheikah technology without much explanation. If you really go through all the side quests and stuff, you do hear mentions of the Calamity War and the Divine Beasts. There are mentions, there are references, but it's very not explained, and I feel like a lot of people wish that it was explained in one of the main quests. Even if it was just one sentence, like, oh, we put everything away because it was too dangerous. And then this idea of a Gloom Guardian, like, I love that. That would be so cool. I remember I did a video on Guardians in Tears of the Kingdom before the game came out, obviously, like a theory video, and one of my biggest wishes was to have like a guardian boss. Of course, I didn't know about the gloom back then, but yeah, that would be so cool for sure. And seeing the divine beasts would be very satisfying, so I do agree with that. The unusable rewards, Hestus gifts and such, would be fine if we could purchase a trophy room for our house. Love that as well. A trophy room would be amazing. Minor is the best sage. I don't agree. Regardless of the reason, I think she's so slow, and I know you can kind of speed her up with certain like fans and stuff on the back part, but yeah, I just don't agree. She's not the worst though, because I think Sidon's ability is the most useless. I know there are uses, obviously, like pumping up the attack power of Zora weapons, and it kind of serves as a one-hit shield as well, but generally speaking, yeah, the worst. Why does Yunobo completely forget the Rook's protection in Tears of the Kingdom? The other sages hadn't really developed an ability yet, but Yunobo already had one from Breath of the Wild. It just seems so confusing to me, plus the lack of anything Sheikah or Guardian related just makes me go crazy. Yeah, so we've talked about the Sheikah stuff already. Yunobo not having the Rook's protection, very valid point. I actually hadn't even thought of that. I think maybe a way that you can justify that is through Yunobo's corruption. Maybe that's something he lost, but that's not brought up, so that's just me making something like an excuse up. It really does not make any sense that he wouldn't have it. Like, that it would just disappear. And if they just didn't want Link to have access to it, like, that wouldn't be an issue. You could just have Yunobo have the ability and Link not have it. So yeah, plot hole? The divine beasts were actually better than the temples. I don't agree with that one. I think the temples are a little bit more creative in the layouts. Like they all have their own like little personality. If you look at the water temple and you look at the lightning temple, like they're completely different. Whereas the divine beasts, they were shaped differently, but the insides were pretty similar. They looked exactly the same, just rearranged basically, so I don't agree with that one. The islands in the sky and the chasm areas were a waste of potential. I think the chasms were done really well. I don't think they should have added a lot more to it, to be honest, because it's already a very overwhelming area. So I think that was enough. The islands in the sky, I agree with. It felt a bit more empty. There is still a lot to explore, but it kind of pales in comparison to the surface and the depths. I think the caves are too small and linear from the ones I found so far. I was really hoping to get into a cave and find a huge explorable area. As you've been to the bottomless cave, that's one for you to try. That one's pretty huge. I think the caves are fine. Personally, I think it would be too much if we had like Sky Island, surface, depths, and then the caves like becoming their own little system as well. Like I feel like that would be a little overwhelming. The depths get pretty repetitive with always having to throw the bright bloom seeds. Okay, so this user offers an alternative. Put more work into the caves instead of the depths because the depths feel a little repetitive, which I can understand. The depths are repetitive and they are hard to navigate. If you don't have bright bloom seeds, it's an issue for sure, and you run out super quick. So yeah, if the caves were more developed and the depths were less developed, then it would have been a good balance. And there could have been more Sky Islands. Yeah, we've discussed that. I definitely agree with that one. I'm a little confused by why the Death Mountain regional phenomena in this game is literally a drug addiction issue. And Yunobo is basically Walter White now. Like, isn't this a kid's game? I get your point. It is very heavily implied that whatever is happening there works like a drug addiction. However, Nintendo can get away, well, not just Nintendo, any game can get away with a lot by just suggesting things instead of just saying them. I mean, they have their E rating because they don't go out and literally say this is a drug problem. So they work around it, so I think it's fine. This one is one of my favorites. I wish they would have had someone else be the Sage of Spirit, maybe Pura. Everybody else got to be a sage, but Spirit was reduced to a construct. I wanted it to be Pura so we could see her spirit for science in action. Maybe it's a quest where you go with her to make a construct and she controls it remotely or rides on it. This would have been so cool. I don't necessarily have anything against Minoru being the Sage of Spirit, like she's fine. She does a good job, but giving that to Pura would have been so cool, and it would have really made sense with who she is as a character. Like the sense of discovery and innovation, it would have been so cool. Nintendo, hire this person for your next game. That's such a good idea. I miss the Blights, and honestly not even for their battles or themes. Kogara was probably the best designed fight of the four, but even then there's no actual reason for these monsters being there besides the one they use for every other one. At least the Blights had an explanation and were even tied to the lore with the champions' deaths. I always thought that made them so much more menacing. So yeah, I can agree with that to an extent. I think lore-wise, the Blights had more meaning, the way they were designed to counter each champion's strength, and the fact that when you were fighting it, like you knew that that Blight was responsible for the death of a champion. It made you more emotionally connected to the battle. But then, on the other hand, battle-wise, the Blights were like the definition of repetitive. So even if the dungeon bosses don't necessarily have enough lore behind them to justify them being there, the battles are way more fun and they're way more different and creative. So this is definitely a hot take. I'm gonna give you the general idea of it just because it's long, but you can pause to read. It's basically saying that the sages, their abilities, are better implemented than the champions in Breath of the Wild because they're companions that you can travel with, and it's more satisfying that way. And this person says that they think that the fact that you can't reach them all the time can make things more exciting, basically. So this is definitely a hot take. I prefer the champion's abilities from Breath of the Wild. There is a major issue, in my opinion, with the way you activate the sages in this game. Having to run around looking for them, they seem to like physically run away from you when you need them. And the fact that you can get them mixed up in the middle of battle, I think it wasn't done like amazingly. I can understand why someone would find that exciting and like an extra challenge. I personally just found it frustrating. That's one of my biggest issues with the game. It's the way that the abilities are designed in a way. The fact that I prefer the champion's abilities, that's just like a matter of taste, I suppose. A lot of people prefer Sidon's ability to Mipha's ability. I don't. I think maybe possibly Yunobo's I think is better than Daruk's, possibly. I think Tulin's is good for transportation, and I like the fact that he's a good fighter in battles. But you know, we all miss Rivali's Gale. I mean, I know we have rockets and stuff, but we all miss Rivali's Gale. So, but I do think that's a matter of just taste. But the fact that they're implemented this way, I do think is a little faulty. So this is a hot take. I think most people would agree that it needs rearranging a little bit. So this one I'm just gonna skim through because it's very similar to one we read before, but it's talking about too many blessings and that the quests aren't as good. I agree that there are too many blessings. I haven't done a lot of shrine quests in Tears of the Kingdom yet, so I do want to hear your thoughts in the comments about how good the shrine quests are in comparison to Breath of the Wild. Do you think they're better? Do you think they're worse? Are they kind of the same? I don't think I've done enough of them to have an opinion on it. So this one, there must be a typo because the first sentence isn't making sense to me, but maybe I just haven't slept enough. While I do agree Yona exciting is rather confusing and feels a bit shoehorned in itself she isn't a bad character. At least not in the way fans make her out to be. Yeah, so here's the thing. I think there are two types of people who are judging the Yona character. Honestly, if you go to my video of when I first saw her and you watch my reaction, I don't have the best reaction to her because I just think she's ugly. Like, and I'm sure she's lovely, and Sidon can, I'm sure, see beauty in different things. Like, not everyone has to look like Mipha, you know? Not every Zora has to look like Mipha. But that was just my first impression. Like, why would they make her so obviously unattractive? That was my only, like, the only thing that took me back a little bit. But she's fine, she's lovely. But I do think that there's another side of the fandom of the people who ship Link with Sidon, and that they were a little bit like, oh, who is she? Like, why is she ruining my ship? And you know what? I don't want to say what I think about that. Go watch my tier list of Breath of the Wild couples, and you'll see what I think about that. There are some plot holes when you compare the story and or map changes compared to what took place in Breath of the Wild. If you need an example of this, just ask me for one. So the user did give an example in one of the replies. For example, the Shrine of Resurrection, that there would be no reason for it to look that destroyed in what, like 5-6 years, which we are presuming is the gap here, maybe more. So I do agree to an extent that there are certain areas that are very decayed and damaged, and it makes you wonder, like, does this make sense? Like, as far as time goes, does this make sense? Probably not, but I do think the big thing here is we don't know the exact time jump. There are things you can look at to say, oh, it's probably 6 years, it's probably 7 years. Like when you look at Hudson's daughter, for example, she looks to be about 6-7, but she's a Gerudo. We don't know exactly how they age, so it is very relative. And until we have someone say it's been 5 years, it's been 6 years, it's been 10 years, then it is a little hard to judge how things are decaying and changing. But this is a good point. So this one, it's very similar to a previous one that was talking about the temples and the bosses. They feel like the Divine Beast has more of a connection to the story and to Link, and I've said what I think about that. There is a point here though that the getting to the temples can be frustrating. Like, it's a long pre-tempo thing that you always have to do, where with the Divine Beasts they weren't that long, with the exception of Aridania. I do think they're very long, I agree, but that's something I like. I appreciate that there's more game. That is not just get to tempo, shoot a few arrows, and you're in the dungeon. I do like that. I think the pre-Divine Beasts quests were very, very short in Breath of the Wild, like target practice, and getting some shock arrows. Like they were very quick, with the exception of Arodania. So I do like that. I appreciate that they made it a little longer, to be honest. Tears of the Kingdom shouldn't be rated E10+, but teen. Like, that opening would definitely give 10-year-old nightmares. I do think it's a very scary game in comparison to other games that have that rating, but Nintendo is not gonna rate anything teen. Like, I mean, I'm sure they would rate something teen, but they're not gonna rate one of their biggest releases teen. That cuts off the general audience and all the kids that want to play. So, rest assured, they did everything they had to do to keep that rating. If it's in there, it passed whatever test they have to use, so yeah. But it is scarier, I agree. But then again, is it scarier than Majora's Mask? Muktarok is weirdly difficult compared to the other bosses. You waste so much time because it jumps around so much. So here's the thing, I agree. I mean, I had trouble with Muktarok. I didn't die or anything. Like, I did it first try, but it was such a struggle just to walk and get there that, like, for the next time I do it, I know I'm just gonna carry a lot of stuff with me, like water tutus and splash fruit and stuff, and I'm gonna take a different approach. Using Sidon's abilities in this boss battle kills it for me. Like, it just doesn't work properly. Could be a skill issue, but yeah. I do think it's a little crazy. Not difficult per se, but like you said, weirdly difficult. Just because moving around, like, ugh. Rauru should have been Link's partner, similar to Midna or Navi. I don't know how I would feel about that. I feel like I would get annoyed. Because Rauru, I love him, but he doesn't have Midna's charm. I think he would just be a little annoying, and Navi is at the other extreme of annoying, obviously. But I don't know if I would want a companion, to be honest with you. I have to think about that. The most obvious issue in the world, why can't we pet dogs? Valid. Valid. So this was a very big comment. I had to cut like only the bottom bit, but you can go to my community post to read the whole thing. But basically, Queen Gibdo relies too much on artificial difficulties, such as lowering your movement and enemy spam, in comparison to the genuinely fun challenges posed by the vast majority of the game's bosses. So I agree, 100%. The only boss that actually killed me throughout the whole game was Queen Gibdo. I don't like it when the boss is designed to be defeated a certain way and making it so that every other way you try is almost impossible. I don't know if that made sense, but basically, the fact that you have to use Richu's lightning, you have to destroy every single hive, destroy all the spawns, and then attack her, use the light. Like, I don't want to fight like that. I want to do it differently, which I did, but because I chose to do it differently, it was a struggle. So I agree. I don't necessarily think that it's designed in the best way. I think a boss can be difficult and still encourage creativity. Thunderblight is an example. Thunderblight is hard, but you can actually defeat him in so many different ways. So I don't like it when it's kind of forced on you to defeat a boss in a certain way. I like Yunobo, and I do not understand the hate for him. Do people really hate Yunobo? I know that he's possibly like the least favorite out of all of them. I don't think people hate him though, I just think they find him a little wimpy and just not as interesting. He's not as layered, but I feel like it was the same for Daruk. I think it's fair to say that Daruk is the least popular champion. A lot of people will say Revali, but Revali incites emotion in people. Whereas Daruk, people are mostly indifferent towards, and I think that's worse. I think just the way that Gorns are characterized in this universe, in Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom, they're just a little less layered. So I think that's what it is. I don't think people actively hate him, but yeah. Yunobo should have stayed the bad guy. See, I agree with this so much. Like, especially have him stay like that for like 3 stages up until Death Mountain. That would be so cool, and it goes back to the last post where it's like, give the Gorons a bit more layers. That would make Yunobo way more layered and way more interesting to people. Agree. The new sage's abilities are useless other than Tulin. I've used everyone's ability outside of their temple lessons less than 5 times. So yeah, I talked about this briefly. Tulin's is good when you're just traveling around. Everyone else's, like, there are certain uses, like Yunobo's ability is good for mining, breaking walls, and things like that. But generally speaking, as far as exploring the overworld, they are a little useless. They are a little useless, yeah, I agree. I don't like building. While it's really cool, objects should have more snapping points to make it easier to make symmetrical buildings. Interesting. I do think this is a hot take. I think people generally really enjoy building. I enjoy building, but not to the extent that some people do. I haven't created anything too crazy, but I do like building, like, things that just make travel easier. I think that's what I use it the most for. Also, Ganondorf isn't amazing, but just alright. His motivation is weak, unlike every other game, and I don't like how they are hiding that this is the same guy from other games, or just a reincarnation. He is really intimidating, and his fight is my second favorite boss fight ever, after Minon's Prime. Okay, so you do like the boss, like the fight, but you don't like his motivations as a character, and the fact that there might be a little bit of a disconnect with the other Zelda games as far as timeline, which I think is an issue everyone has. I just tend to look at this as just something separate, like a parallel thing, but I get what you're saying. I disagree about the motivations being weak. I feel like this game does a very good job of showing a villain who is motivated by power, and that should be enough. Evil usually comes from that. I think we've gotten so used to villains being like anti-heroes and with the troubled past and always having this deep-rooted motive of why they act the way they act. But some people are just evil. And I do appreciate that Nintendo did this with Ganondorf. I don't think you need a big motivation to be evil. I think power is motivation enough. They could have done more with the depths, and Yunobo is mid. Okay, we've talked about the depths, so I'm not gonna go into it again. And we've talked about Yunobo, but there's a little edit here. All of the desert music is bad, even the Queen Gibdo boss fight music. Okay, disagree. I'm not crazy about the Gibdo music, like the boss music. I think it's fine, but the desert music, it's so good. They could have done better with the sage's abilities. The champion's abilities from Breath of the Wild were actually better. I've discussed this. Agreed. This one is also very long. You can pause if you want to read everything, but it's basically saying that the HUD, when you're trying to fuse stuff with your arrow or to throw things, is just very badly designed, and also suggesting that if you fuse something to an arrow, that should just stay as your chosen item until you choose something else. So I agree with the HUD thing. Like, I think everyone's experienced this, where they're in the middle of a battle and they're fusing, and then they're just scrolling through an endless line of items, and it's just not practical. So I do think that could have been done much better. About the arrows just staying fused to whatever you chose previous, I think it could work. It would be a bit confusing when you just want to use a normal arrow though. But I do think, like, generally speaking, this whole thing could have been designed better. 100%. The cutscenes after you complete a temple are annoying. I get that it's meant to be like that because the developers didn't know which temple you would go to first, but the old sages didn't need to say word for word almost the exact same thing. Oh yes, I think it's become almost like a running joke at this point. The imprisoning war, like imprisoning, whatever, the war. Like, could you not tell me the same story over and over again? I do agree with that. By the time I was at my 3rd temple, I actually skipped that cutscene altogether. And I don't usually skip cutscenes the first time I'm playing a game, but it's just the same. It's the same. So yeah, it could have been done differently. They could have programmed it in a way that it would only show up at the first temple you did, regardless of which one that was. And then when you did the other ones, you would get just a reference to it. Yeah, very repetitive, very repetitive. Ultra Hand is overrated, and I don't find it that fun. And Recall is a lot cooler of a concept that I can never find any uses for, even though I want to be able to use it all the time. Ascend and Fuse are really cool, but that's not really a hot take. I don't think Ultra Hand is overrated. I think it's great. It's like Magnesis, but better. I think all of the abilities actually are very cool and have their wide range of uses. I think you can use Recall in more ways than you probably think you can. I think that the cutscenes for the Divine Beasts being completed were significantly better than all of the cutscenes of the new Sages. We kind of talked about that a couple of comments ago about the repetition of them, because just like you're always hearing about the war, you're also getting very similar cutscenes with the Sages and their ancestors. It took me a while to remember that word. So I do agree with this. I think in Breath of the Wild, the cutscenes you got with the spirits of the champions were very heartwarming, and they were very tailored to how each champion's relationship with Link was. So I do agree with that. The water temple was the best one. Is this a hot take? I don't know. I don't actually know which temple people prefer. My favorite was the lightning one. Just the temple itself. I wasn't crazy about the boss, but I love the temple itself. I think that was the best one. I don't know. I'm gonna have to do some tier lists in the future to really figure this out. But to me, the lightning one was the best one. Now this one is very poetic. Seeing as he is such a goblin, I have come to the conclusion that Link is just a reskinned Bokoblin. They do have very similar behaviors, so. Now, I have no idea what you're talking about when you're talking about Minecraft sheep machines. I've never played Minecraft in my life, so I don't know what you're talking about. I'm sure you're right, though. And why is there a material limit? I do get a little frustrated about the limits of arrows. I wish I could have more than 999, but that's just because I'm arrow crazy. I use arrows for everything. But yeah, I do wonder why they actually put a limit on items. I don't know. Ascend is the best rune. There, I said it. You all just talk about Ultra Hand and not having Revali's Gale. I invite you to hold L and press up for once. So I do think Ascend takes the place of Revali's Gale quite a bit, obviously. Although I think Rocket Shields do that better. But I do love Ascend. I haven't been able to decide like which ability is my favorite, to be completely honest with you. I haven't thought about it too much. I suppose between Ascend and Ultra Hand, I would probably prefer Ascend? Question mark? I don't know. Zelda looks hotter with long hair. Short hair makes her look a little too young. I don't know, I like both looks. I don't know. I feel like they're also, you know, when you're going through something and you have a haircut, because like it's new phase of life and stuff. So I do think it makes sense that she would change her look up a bit. I think she looks good regardless. I do like the short hair a lot. I don't think it makes her look young. I think it makes her look older. Generally speaking, when women grow older, their hair style gets a little shorter. So maybe that's my association with it. But yeah, I don't know. I like them both, and I'm a very big believer that Zelda should have a different look in every game, because she can rock everything, so. Zelda is way prettier than Pura. I agree. I do think there's been kind of this awakening of Pura fans recently, ever since this game came out, because she had like a bit of a redesign, and she's gorgeous. But yeah, I'm more of a Zelda person myself. These hot takes are very hot. Thank you. Ganondorf's character was super disappointing and wasn't that interesting. I disagree so much. I loved his character in this game. I love how many flashbacks we got. He is thick, he is gorgeous, he is strong, he's muscly. Such an upgrade from Calamity Ganon. Like, such an upgrade. That's my personal opinion. Pura isn't that attractive, we need more of Sidon. I think Pura is more attractive than Sidon, to be honest. But maybe that's because I don't really find fish people that attractive. Although Mipha is quite beautiful. I don't know. I'd rather have more Pura than more Sidon, to be honest with you. But I do love me some Sidon. Intro is far too long. I can see why someone would feel that way. However, the fact that the intro is the only place where we're actually playing with Zelda next to us, that makes me wish that it was longer. That's just how I feel. And last but not least, Guardians were so much more annoying than the Gloomhands are. I don't miss them at all. Guardians were more annoying than Gloomhands, yes. I still miss them though. I feel like they were menacing in their own way, and I feel like they could have been reused in this game for something special. Like a different type of boss fight in the depths, like it was mentioned a while ago. I do miss them. Maybe in the DLC we'll get something, but I'm not holding my breath for it. Those were all the hot takes you guys sent me. Thank you so much, and just comment away if you agree or disagree with my reactions to them. Comment your opinions on them, and thank you so much for watching. I'll see you guys next time.